Hey everyone, and welcome back to another industry report. So, Epic have just launched their most aggressive move yet. Seriously, Total War Troy is going to be completely free to keep for anyone who downloads it on launch day. Now, that's like a AAA PC game, basically, and a launch. This is an experiment Epic have sort of tried before, but never on a scale like this. It's a pretty daring plan. It's got a bunch of risks for those involved, so the question here is, who actually gains, who loses, and when you apply a deep knowledge, which I do think I have, of Creative Assembly's latest Total War outings, being a massive Total War fan, what does this suggest about Troy? What can we read into this? Well, let's get into the story first, though. Of course, be sure to like and sub. It truly does help us out on the platform. And if you want to support our team a bit deeper and get the likes of the daily briefing, physical loot, and a bunch of other stuff, you can check out the Patreon. So, thanks for making it happen. And with that said, let's get into the video. Come its August 13th release date, Total War Saga Troy will be completely free to play for the first 24 hours on the Epic Store. You just have to redeem it on day one, and then the game is actually yours forever. It's literally free in that case. It's an almost suspiciously generous offer, and it's one that in some ways does make a lot of sense when you actually think about it. Now, of course, players are skeptical, as can be expected with an exclusivity deal such as this, but when you actually dive into the situation, well, there's actually quite a lot going on, and it really is quite interesting. The Total War Twitter page is, of course, full of concerned fans. Sega absolutely risk alienating a large portion of their fanbase with this move, even though they could all be potentially getting the newest release for free, because for many people this is something that is about principle, plus a few other things as well. Now, the Epic arrangement is a one-year deal, so the Steam release of Troy has been pushed back to next August. And that really does suck for a few reasons, including, well, consumer choice, but also, well, that mods created through the Steam Workshop obviously aren't going to be a thing if it's on Epic, and mods are a huge part of the appeal for those games for many players. As an example, there's loads of mods like DVD at Imperia that are absolute fan favorites because it brings, in that case, Total War 2 in a direction more in line with what a lot of players want from the historical setting. So there are countless examples of mods that greatly improve those games, and that's something that is not going to be happening with Troy because it's not going to be on the Steam Workshop. Now, of course, mods will be available when the Steam version launches, but that's not going to be much of a consolation for players who are going to be cut off on the Epic side of things for a year. Now, Epic are said to be working on making their storefront compatible with mods like the Steam Workshop, but despite that being on their roadmap, there has been very little information on the initiative and definitely not a clear date as to when we can expect it. So players who want that full Total War experience that includes mods, they are just going to have to wait and purchase it on Steam. Now, there's also no plans for cross-play or cross-progression between the different versions, though I imagine you'll be able to just manually grab your save file if you need to. Other players, though, have got more in-the-moment concerns. Fresh off the back, as an example of the Epic Store's astounding collapse during the GTA 5 free giveaway, a lot of people are pretty concerned that the servers won't be able to handle demand during that 24-hour window, and that they could actually miss out on getting the game for free. But in fairness, the good thing here is the devs have assured fans that there actually are contingencies in place for if the Epic storefront bursts into flames/tears again. What's interesting to me, though, is that Creative Assembly are actually very tuned into the mindset of their fan base here, because the accompanying statement actually goes into a lot of detail on why they took the deal, and it seems like they very much understand that people are going to see this and think, right, yes, I've got less choice, and I guess a free game, but because of, business stuff behind the scenes that often, well, audiences don't feel that good about. So they say that this deal lets them reach new audiences and pursue their goal of hosting the Total War series on more platforms. And yes, that apparently means that to reach more platforms is, well, reaching more platforms is something that you do via an exclusivity deal that locks the game out of other platforms. Instead of just saying, hey, Epic Games, can we publish in your storefront too? And Epic probably saying, yeah, sure. a bit weird. Now, actually on that topic, they do say that Epic reached out to them with this deal, and that's kind of what kicked things off. And it is kind of funny because they keep on saying that it's about their goals as a studio and not really about the money, but as I'm going to get into in a little bit, I think there is a money side there that will make a lot of sense for them because of the track record of the Total War saga games and just generally some of the feeling within the Total War community on the lead up to Troy. And I think that actually might make this make a good bit more sense. Now, as for reaching more players via this, well, I certainly imagine that the free side of things will get a bunch of new players in who will have never tried a Total War and who will probably see this one, probably see, oh, this is a super thematic, smaller scoped one that's maybe a bit more action feeling. Sure, I'll go and give it a go. But that said, I also do doubt that the Epic audience coming over will be a large part of that audience expansion. I think it will just be people word of mouth hearing, oh, the new Total War is free if I get it on this day. So, yeah, that's what's up there. And to be honest, I kind of doubt there's even much of an Epic audience. I think there's a Fortnite audience who uses the Epic Store, but past that, I think the Epic Store is just a storefront. It's not like Steam where it's became, I guess, a hub and a set of tools for players. Now, Creative Assembly also at the same time are saying that this deal felt right with Troy specifically, and that's because pre-orders were not live in Steam, so nobody was already financially invested. I think that certainly is true. And they also said that the series was at a point where the devs felt like they could expand, and that the Epic deal allows the devs to diversify their storefront offerings, of course, by doing an exclusivity deal, which is a bit funny, and that it means they can build the kind of back-end infrastructure that can support expansion. So that's all stuff that, you know what, even if it does mean something to Creative Assembly, I don't think it's going to mean that much to the customers, and for this, I think the customers are king. And going on, they also say that, crucially for them, the agreement enables Total War fans to have the game for free in time for the franchise's 20th birthday. And, I mean, look, I think that's really cool, and I do think that in some ways this is a good thing. You can just get this game for free, no financial risk. That is pretty sweet, but I think this whole tying it into the franchise's 20th birthday, I don't think that feels too relevant to players. I think that's just something they're sort of saying to, I guess, sound good. And then, of course, this free situation is something they said, though, like, it couldn't be the case without Epic. They couldn't afford to give it away for their birthday without Epic, though the devs were very careful to state, and this is important, that they don't have any plans for future games to be Epic exclusives. Note, they didn't say they won't be, they just said they did not have any plans. So I suppose we would have to see how the financial side of things actually works out for this one. Certainly, if we see other Total War games have a similar agreement or an exclusivity period, then you could start to assume that, yeah, it turned out this went pretty well for them. And it certainly is a daring plan overall, and I think it could be a mixed bag in the long run, though, I mean, surely the fact that Epic are footing the bill here mitigates the initial risk. It does make you wonder, though, what that deal looked like. We do know from previous instances that basically what happens is that Epic will match a game's predicted sales for the promotional period. Now, considering that this period is the full launch day of a major game release, I think we can assume that Epic sent quite the dump truck full of money over to Sega and Creative Assembly. I mean, potentially, every single fan who is actually invested in the series and would have been a day one Troy purchaser, they're now getting it for free on day one. And I guess that could also mean that sales could peter off after that because so many people would have got it for free. But the thing is that that in itself might be okay because the Total War games, I'd say especially Warhammer 2, have got quite strong long tail revenue because of DLC. So maybe a huge initial onboarding via Epic could suit the team's goals quite nicely. Plus, then, there's always the prospect of a second bite of sales whenever it hits Steam next year, and that would be a case where it would be accompanied by any DLC packs released between now and then, and probably a state where the game is just working better than it did at launch, which is often an issue for Creative Assembly's products. Now, people could get the game free on Epic, that would earn CA, Creative Assembly, money now, and then they could buy a version with mods and DLC and stuff like that on Steam in a year, earning Creative Assembly even more at that time, even though the customer would have only purchased the game once. So that's certainly an interesting thing where there might be a bit of like double dipping that CA would kind of get for free, which is quite interesting. Now, of course, Epic aren't like new to this strategy, though Troy, I'd say, is the highest profile game that they've given out in this way. As a launch, a totally reliable delivery service was free for its first week back in April, while the new Samurai Showdown collection will be free for 1 week come its Epic release on June 11th, and it actually won't even be available available on Steam until after that free week is over. Comparatively, though, Troy is only free for that first 24 hours. I think that speaks to Epic's strategy, maybe around different types of releases. Like, can we assume going forward that indies and smaller releases get a free week, but then the large-scale AAAs get a free day? I guess it is just, how big are Epic willing to go here? Is there a limit of how big of a game they are going to do a free deal with? How much money are they actually going to spend? Because a game like this could have made a serious amount of money, and, well, here they are, just, I guess, ponying it all up front. So I suppose, is the goal here, in terms of broad business strategy from Epic, is the goal to funnel that Fortnite money into creating a massive long-term revenue stream? Do they maybe know that they're Epic Games, they want to be around for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and they know that Fortnite's not going to be around for all of that time, so while they've got all that money now, rather than live it big or do anything like that, is the fiscally responsible thing to totally invest into a new wing of their business that could, of course, just pay them, right, decades into the future. I mean, yeah, Epic, they certainly are going all in this free game scheme. They actually extended it through the rest of the year when it was actually due to finish. And while Epic have always had a bit of a hard time winning over the players, they certainly have had more success with devs and with publishers, because at the end of the day, those are businesses. They've got, in some cases, shareholders to appease. In other cases, for devs, they've got mouths to feed, right? People's wages to pay. And turns out money really does speak in those situations, which, I think it's not an unreasonable thing, right? It's just a situation of different incentives for consumers and for the devs and publishers. Now, we're not going to waste time talking about the rev share again, but obviously it's pretty good, and the revamped free games scheme on its own could be enough to garner more support from devs and publishers. From the dev perspective here, loads of people get to play their game, that builds up their brand, they still get a whole bunch of money as well, and it's money that is guaranteed too, so it's a pretty good deal. And also, even if this game has got middling ratings during that free period, well, it's free. People are still going to pick it up, and that's still going to look good for them, right? They're going to get more money, or, well, more numbers going up, I suppose. Now, aside from the guaranteed sales being paid up front, Tim Sweeney also recently said that Epic's free giveaways help to boost sales on other platforms, basically allowing a customer to try something in their store that they maybe otherwise overlooked even, and, maybe if they enjoy that, they can make a purchase somewhere else, like on Steam or on a console. Of course, though, it also spreads brand awareness for those games, which would just bump up sales in general. And this is something that would fit Creative Assembly's long-term ambitions for reaching players via more platforms, and the money coming in will no doubt encourage their publisher Sega to permit further experimentation. But there is another angle here, right? And maybe it's sad that I kind of wasted the spicy bit for, so far into the video that most of the viewers who clicked on it are probably left, but the previous Total War Saga game, Thrones of Britannia, I think it got a bunch of sales initially because people kind of thought, Vikings is a cool TV show, and they're using Wardruna for their big trailer, and it's, cool, Thrones of Britannia. But then the game was actually received pretty poorly and had severe balance issues. It was a bit redeemed through updates and patches, but it had significant issues, right? Now, that would not bode well for the performance of the second Saga game, because the core Total War fans would be pretty skeptical. I know I certainly am. And then, for Total War Saga Troy, a lot of people are also really in a bit of a strange position about the way the game is designed, because it's going for this mixture of history and myth. And it's really a question of, are they going to be able to really nail that balance? And right now, it's a situation where a lot of their core fans are pretty skeptical about that. So I've got to wonder, obviously pre-orders hadn't been open, but is this a situation where CA maybe saw that early tracking wasn't good for this game, wasn't as good as it maybe should have been, or maybe as good as it was for Thrones of Britannia? They maybe knew that it was not going to be wasn't going to be a 9 out of 10 release, maybe it was going to be a 7 out of 10 release, and maybe they just thought, you know what, we could take the risk of putting this out in the wild, or we could just get guaranteed financial success by saying yes to Tim. I've got to imagine that probably weighed significantly on their minds. And then, of course, there's a situation where the Epic deal actually could offer the unique chance for a second first impression of a sub-series, right? They might even get 2 full launches worth of revenue from a single game, where Troy comes out on Epic, they get a bunch of money, they actually then spend a year making the game good, and then it comes out on Steam and is really good and has DLC, and then a bunch of the core Total War people come on and buy it. by all accounts, and despite criticism, this approach does seem to be working for Epic. They currently hold about a 15% market share, which is pretty substantial considering that they've not been in the marketplace for that long. And regardless of how we feel about exclusives, Epic have consistently managed to get devs on their side and publishers, and the games are coming. Now, granted, features are still being rolled out at a glacial pace, but the fact that they still are coming, that does bode well for, for the people who are onto that store, it bodes well for Epic actually succeeding and their ability to facilitate more of deals like this in the future. So, for this one, the deal is done and dusted, but we're going to have to wait until August to see just how worth it the whole thing has been. I suppose if Troy comes out and is an incredible game from launch, it's like a Three Kingdoms tier success in terms of quality, then I'll be kind of thinking, interesting, Epic really did give them a lot of money. But if Troy comes out and has a very mixed Thrones of Britannia-like reception from the core fans, then I'm going to think, right, this is actually some deft risk mitigation from Creative Assembly when it came to them dealing with the deals that landed on their table. So there you go, and I suppose as well, at least players got something for free with this, and that does, I guess, make it feel a bit better than, say, the Metro Exodus situation that in many ways did kick this whole thing off probably just a bit over a year ago. And there we have it, a pretty interesting situation overall. I don't think we've seen something quite like this, and to be honest, I never would have expected that the next Total War game would launch in this manner. So I'm definitely, I am going to get it on launch. I mean, it's free. Why not? What's the risk there? Mainly for me, though, it's I want to get it and I want to see, is this good, right? Or is this a really middling Creative Assembly release? Is this another Thrones of Britannia? And if so, then yes, I think a number of things would make quite a bit more sense. So that's where I'm going into this. I'd love to know, though, where do you actually lie on this issue? What do you think about the exclusivity and how that interacts with the game being free? Let me know down below. Thank you very much for watching this video. Stay tuned for more on the channel. And with that, I'll see you next time.